many dance students face challenges along their journey to what's a challenge that you feel you face, whether that's your pre-professional days or perhaps in your professional days, and how do you feel like you've worked to overcome that challenge?
So a huge challenge that I faced when I'm going to speak of mostly my pre-professional training and how it transitioned into my professional life. When I was in school, it's obviously a very intense time in your life. Like you are kind of in that, you're in that position where you don't really know if you're going to make it or not. And so you feel like it's kind of hard it was very hard for me to practice, self-acceptance and self-kindness, because I was constantly thinking of what can I do to increase my chances of making it into a company. And a huge part of that was body image. And that is directly correlated with nutrition. It was very difficult to go through puberty. As everyone knows, it's a very young career, and we start at a very young age. And usually when we're in a pre-professional level, we're going through puberty. And that was very hard for me because I wasn't this like thin, super lean person that I looked at professionals and that's how they looked. And I was someone that had body fat, and I was having like development in my hips and that type of growth. So that was something that was very difficult, especially, just being honest, there was a lot of like talks. I was told like, oh, like you just need to lose a few pounds, or you need to lean out or something, when I had no idea what that meant. Like I didn't know what to do. So that not only was difficult for me and my idea of body image, but it was also difficult for me mentally to gain confidence and to be happy with myself and to feel I could be kind to myself, because I would always try and figure out what I was doing wrong. And, you're hard on yourself when you're a teenager, but that definitely was a difficulty going through school and going through all the difficulties of ballet itself, technically and competitively. But so that was a big thing, and it definitely transitioned into my professional life as well when I started in a company, because you look at these principal dancers or these soloists or even core dancers they have like this ideal body that ballet has kind of normalized, which can be very thin. But for me, I wasn't necessarily, I didn't feel like I had, I like my thighs would like touch, for example, like if I was like in a bathing suit or something, I didn't feel like I had this ideal body type. And having that low confidence as well, it was really hard to kind of get out of that negative cycle.
So much of our intense training days really does line up with the years of puberty, between whether that's from the ages of like 12 to even at 18. And I think that that's the time when really building the framework of confidence is so critical. But if you're battling those, I always call them antiquated ideals of what we expect in the ballet world, that can be really hard on a young dancer. And it can even, for some young dancers, steer them away from really pursuing this passion. So clearly, you were able to overcome it in a way that you're at a point where you are in your career now, where you have learned to some extent how to better view yourself with your body image and your body. But we'll of course get to that. I don't want to jump too far ahead. But that being said, because in the beginning when you were explaining, you said, body image does really correlate with nutrition. So my question for you is, was there ever a specific time in your training as a pre-professional where you started to make a connection between the foods that you were putting on your plate and how you were actually dancing studio or on stage?
That's a good question. The thing about my pre-professional training is that I think maybe I'm not sure of people's experience that went to bigger schools, but the school that I went to, we weren't performing that much. We were mostly in the studio, and there would be a lot of starting and stopping. It would be a lot of very intense work that was obviously incredibly demanding of our bodies and our brains, but it's not like I was ever building up stamina to the point that I am as a professional. So honestly, like, I didn't really have that click of the food that I was eating and the importance of it until I became a professional. And that's something that, yeah, it's really hard to admit, because I mean, I'd love to be able to say, yeah, I like figured it out, and that's what made me have a successful path towards being a professional, but it just wasn't the case. Like, I had to unlearn so much as I started to understand the importance of developing stamina, which I hadn't experienced up until I was, I'd say, like 22.
Yeah, very interesting. And, you know, from there, we spoke about this. There's no doubt that there's a lot of pressure in the dance world. So how you really balance a more positive outlook on body image, especially in your professional career?
Okay, so the difference between how I feel now and how I used to feel when I was living a more like unhealthy lifestyle. Now my relationship with food started improving with my professional career and once stamina was starting to be built, but it also started developing when I had a greater sense of loving myself as a woman and understanding that I am a woman. I am not a child. I am not someone that should look malnourished or should fit any sort of cookie cutter mentality that might be more oriented around like a younger type of look. I am a woman, and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's something that I had to accept very much in the studio, but also away from the studio. And when that started happening, I started realizing, okay, how can I fuel myself so that I can actually maintain these bodily functions that are necessary in being a woman. You know, like the whole idea of not getting a period, that was something that I did not want to allow. That's not something I wanted to let happen, and it's happened when I was younger, and I know so many other dancers that experienced that. So that was the first thing. That was a big one. And then also realizing that there was dancers that I was looking up to in the company that they didn't have like this this image that I had kind of idolized for so long. I grew up watching a lot of Russian ballet dancers that are incredibly thin, you know, and it's just kind of the culture there. But I was looking at people that looked like women, but athletic women, and women with muscle tone, and that's something that looked more possible. So that kind of helped me understand, okay, I want a balanced way of eating. I want to have greens. I want to have all sorts of colors. I want to have veggies. I want to have protein. I want to have carbs. I have to understand how I feel in this adult body, as opposed to what I was told I should eat, which would be like reduced carbs, reduced sugars, reduced everything, which wasn't really making me feel good, and it didn't make me feel comfortable in my skin.
So important that you made this connection of changing what you're striving for to a more attainable body, more practical, more realistic, more diversity, more body shape. It's super important for younger dancers to just have those idols and realize that they can still be in the dance world if they don't have that antiquated feel of what a body should look like. I would love for you to walk us through a sample day of how you fuel.
Now, yeah. I'm not dancing really, other than just like within a small perimeter and inside the house. So it's very different that you don't have that sense of taking up space that you get in the studio. So honestly, like with the pandemic and everything, I've kind of oriented my eating habits off of what I you know, just like taking time for a meal, not necessarily being in a rush ever. And that's something I've really enjoyed. It's been pretty meditative for me. So now I'll wake up, I'll drink water. Hydrating is kind of a big thing that I've also learned to be incredibly important. I usually like to have some coffee, so I'll make coffee while I'm making breakfast, and usually I'll have eggs of some sort of bread, depending on if I have meat in the fridge, which is it depends on how I feel when I'm at the store. If there's any like chicken sausage, I'd like to have that in the morning. So just a good balance. I'll usually have fruit. I like to have smaller portions spread out throughout the day and then have like a proper dinner. And that just works for me. But I don't know, I'm a big fan of pasta. I love pasta, and I love having just different combinations of ingredients to like top the pasta with. So I'll usually have like zucchini or mushrooms or any sort of seasonal food that catches my interest. Green onion, garlic, and yeah, I usually will just like mix it all together with sauce or without sauce and put it on top of pasta. That's about it.
So
and I love ice cream too.
A lot of questions about how should I be eating differently while I'm not dancing much at holiday or traveling, or even when you're on tour and you have those long stretches, those long days where you're like sitting on a bus all day and before you actually get to the stage. So a lot of dancers always ask me, how do I balance my eating habits between these differences of those really busy days and those days where you actually have time? And I love that you're making a point. You even said that it's somewhat meditative to you to really take time for your meals. Now more than ever, it's the perfect opportunity for a dancer to practice mindful eating habits. Sometimes we get very used to cleaning our plate just because like we're used to eating certain foods or a certain amount of foods, or if you're trying to be more controlling over your food choices, then I'll feel like eating exactly what they're serving themselves. And now I'm trying to educate dancers to really challenge themselves about tuning more into their fullness cues at a meal, and really sitting down and trying those mindful eating techniques, closing your screen, sitting down, taking breaths, drinking water while you're eating, just to help naturally rebuild what we so often lose touch, which is our intuitive feelings of hunger and fullness. Especially for dancers who are just constantly going from stage to rehearsals to, if they're younger and they're pre-professional, they're going to their academic coursework. So there's a ton to balance throughout the day. And I think now is just the perfect time for us to take the structured routines that we know so well and put them on the back burner and try the more intuitive process around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in, intuitive practices. I believe that for me personally, it's never really worked for me to just follow something and keep that same rigidity without any sort of adaptation. So I think, like, for example, if I'm working less, like right now, where I'm really not that active, like the most I do is really indoor class or going on walks, or like swimming if I'm near water. So, if I'm feeling like I'm having a more strenuous day, like I'm probably going to want to eat more. And it's the same in the studio. If there's rehearsal days where I do nothing. I do absolutely nothing, and that's just the reality of it. I'll be understudying, or there'll be like a run through where it's like you can't really do much and you just kind of mark things in the back. And so it's really not a lot of energy being used. And if anything, it's more mental energy, just trying to get through the day without, maybe falling asleep, which, it happens. During those days, I honestly, maybe I'll like crave something with more sugar in it, and I won't even know why. Like maybe I'll want like a pastry, and it won't be like a high volume amount of food, but it'll be something that will, make me like kind of awake, make me feel like satisfied, and that's all I really need for a few hours. And then there's days where I know there's going to be like multiple run-throughs, and during those days, I usually the night before, when I know that that's going to happen the next day, I usually make sure I have a good dinner. And I usually make sure I hydrate a lot. Gatorade, the electrolytes. Like if I know I'm going to be sweating a lot, I would like to, compensate in a way where I have more electrolytes.
especially for the summer, sometimes Gatorade is a really easy, convenient choice because you're sweating more. You need those electrolytes and has a little bit of sugar in it, which just
Mhm.
like you said, helps you kind of pick up those energy levels. And just something that I want to touch back on, you said, satisfaction. Satisfaction is such a key factor in our food choice. Just choosing only the healthy foods because they think they want to be healthy for their performance. But in the meanwhile, those foods, sure, they are healthy, but not satisfying, then they're never really going to feel satisfied. Might end up more nourishing throughout the day or at the end of eating. So I love that you said satisfaction is something that you look for when you are fueling, whether it be during your performance season or not your performance season. But now to kind of get back to your performance season, I'd love to just ask more specifically, do you have a pre-performance meal or snack that you like to do? I kind of want to break down how you handle performances from pre-performance, mid-performance, and post-performance. So why don't you kind of talk a little bit of that?
Pre-performance, I'm a big fan of bananas. I have a lot of cramps in my calves and in my arches usually when I perform, especially if it's kind of a strenuous role. Point shoes kind of do that to me. So I'm a big fan of having a lot of bananas when I'm performing, just for that potassium.
Definitely.
Also, it's very filling, very good energy.
Right.
I usually pre-performance, the night before performance, more pasta. Just because, the carbohydrates, I personally respond well to having a high carb diet when I'm performing. It gives me energy. It makes me feel awake the next day. I'm not like someone that just has like a little salad. It just has never worked for me.
Carbs are a major source of energy. Can't pick that up. Things like the keto diet, a lot of dancers definitely get scared of carbs, but you heard it here, guys. Don't be scared of carbs. They're a major source of energy, especially for performance.
Yes, exactly. And so, I know I'm going to be doing a lot, so I need to fuel myself. And then so during the show, I try and have like a smaller portioned meal of something like, like half a sandwich or, like once again, like a pastry and then like a coffee and then some water and like a banana, like something that's just smaller portions. Really just am fine with having some fruit and water. After a performance, I have to have dinner. Like I'm someone that I need to eat before I go to bed, especially after a long day of shows. So that's kind of the same thing where usually the next day we'll have another show. And so it's kind of that same cycle of like, okay, proper dinner, proper veggies, protein, carbs, water, electrolytes if I can. And that's kind of when I feel okay because I don't need to dance after eating. Like I usually just sit for a little bit. I'm usually on my phone or I'm reading or I'm doing something, watching something to kind of relax and unwind because I have all that adrenaline built up.
Right.
And then I usually fall asleep and it's usually pretty late. Like it's a very strange schedule during performance season, but that's just kind of how I manage, especially if I don't want to get lightheaded or something the next day, which I will if I don't have enough food.
So that's really important. The night before, what you're saying is that, how you're eating throughout the week, the day before, it's all impacting the next day of your performance. So it's not like we're just eating for that. We're really trying to eat for even the future and making sure, you having a solid dinner after your performance, helping with your recovery from the previous show. And it's also helping to top off like your glycogen stores for the next day of rehearsals and then performances. So it's such a good point that you really have to make an effort to have a solid meal after the show, even if it's so late.
Yeah, and I know that some people, that's the thing, everyone kind of has a different situation going on. Like this is, of course, like I'm all about, individual points of view. Like this is something that works for my body. It works for my, it feels right to me and it works. And I've been someone that did the whole, like don't eat anything and then like binge. Like I feel like so many people like kind of normalized in the ballet culture, but in the end, like it wasn't good for my skin, it wasn't good for my brain, it wasn't good. Like the serotonin is like 95% of your serotonin is developed in your gastrointestinal tract. So like I was definitely dealing with all sorts of like mental health, like just difficulties. And I didn't understand that food was a direct, culprit of that type of thing. So this has helped me, and I'm still developing it. Every year is different. It's not like I've figured it out by any means, but this pattern has helped the most. Oh, and allowing during shows, it's a big thing, especially with my company, that we'll have like chocolate or sweets or something that we provide like for each other, or people will share it. And that's something that obviously I can't go crazy or else I'll probably get a headache, but that will also be a good way to get that satisfaction type of energy going, like during shows. And I've been cool with that.
That's also just like an experience. It sounds like that's a really fun thing that your company does, that if you are not allowing yourself to take part in, you're going to kind of miss out on what could be a fun situation with your company. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up. Everyone is different, and everyone has things that work for them and things that don't work for them. Exactly why I do these live chats with you guys, the pros, because I want younger dancers to see that not everyone has the same habits, but that doesn't mean that there's just a one size fits all when it comes to fueling for a dancer. I mean, there's obviously many different variations on how we can do. So just one general question. I'd love to hear how you define what a healthy dancer means.
I would define it as somebody that is constantly willing to kind of unlearn and relearn things consistently, and being open to other people and like other people's experience, so that you can kind of gain that understanding that everyone is different. And then once you gain that, you have to practice that self-love, that intuitional way of thinking, of having a relationship between your mind and your body, and knowing that it's kind of an everlasting journey as your body develops and as your mind changes, and being willing to adapt, and also knowing that you're going through that, just developing that relationship with food, and making sure that you are feeding yourself. Like if you're a vehicle, if our body's a vehicle, it's like you don't want to give yourself a skimpy amount of fuel. You don't want to give yourself insufficient. You want to give yourself very high grade fuel, and you want to listen to your body so you can understand if it's working properly and make adjustments as your body changes. And in doing so, you then have a greater understanding to hopefully, and this is something that I'm constantly working on, hopefully you don't compare yourself to others, because you understand that if you're going through this, then probably someone else is going through this as well, or you would hope that they would.
Right.
And you gain that type of understanding of like a healthy dancer is someone that has enough of a relationship with themselves and their body to give yourselves the proper fuel, and to be able to not judge others on how they handle their bodies, but hopefully be able to like recognize and like help others if they need that type of assistance, if they are struggling. Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy to be healthy in an industry that honestly, like there's talks that happen in professional careers. Like it's something that people feel that sense of shame like well into their adulthood, and I think it's really hard to kind of change that process into being like, okay, well, am I actually being healthy? Am I actually doing what I can to give myself like the proper nutrition? Because if so, you're probably not going to be binging. You're probably not going to be doing these other things that would lead to an unhealthy body and unhealthy mind.
Yes.
It's just kind of gaining that awareness.
Definitely. It's so important to realize that it's not just about how our body looks. It's also about how our mind works and our mentality, and realizing that food plays a role in all of that. So Emily, thank you so much. You brought up such incredible points. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Unless there's any other points that you want to bring up.
I would like to just bring up, like, shout out to the Black Lives Matter movement. I hope everybody is learning. I hope everybody is sharing their own opinions and views, like within their social circles, and I hope everyone's listening. And
learning, listening is a big thing. reading, diversifying feeds.
Yeah, exactly. Listen to your Black peers and share those difficult conversations within your social circles, and do the best you can.
Absolutely. Emily, it was a pleasure speaking to you, and I'll talk to you soon.
You too, Rachel. Thank you.